is 7 o'clock. We'll call the Marion County Board of Supervisors for Monday, July 19, 2021 into order and have roll call and public notification.
Okay, Dan Buchanan.
Here.
Don Horstman.
Present.
Bill Everett.
Here.
Bert Skinner.
Here.
Dale Heineke.
Here.
Bob Rogers.
Here.
Oscar Scope.
Here.
John Banks.
Here.
Terry Lee.
Here.
Carolyn Bartlett. Here. Pam Fall. Here. Bill Schradel.
Present.
Gary Taxtel.
Here.
Jim Gores.
Present.
Gary Nelson.
Here.
Roberta Mosentein. Here. Pete Olson.
Here.
Steve Johnson.
Here.
Carol Moen.
Here.
Eric Panyer. I see he's on.
Here.
Eric. Louis Oki.
Here.
Russ Rimsey.
Here.
Todd Gerland.
Here.
Jerry McRoberts.
Here.
Mark Thompson.
Present.
Bun Hansen.
Here.
Stacy Wenzel.
Here.
Dana Heller.
Here.
Bob Anderson.
Here.
Okay, that makes 29 present. IDN Cook County Clerk have complied with open meeting public notification laws. Meeting notices are posted on the electronic meeting notice board on the first and second floor of the government center and main floor of the justice center. Hard copies in the public meeting folder just inside the clerk's office window. In addition, all 5 county newspapers have been notified. And this agenda was posted on July 14th at 9:48 a.m.
The invocation will be pastored by Pastor Coughlin with United Methodist.
Thank you. Good evening. Dear God, it is a privilege for us to gather here this evening. It's a privilege for us to live in a land where we can gather and where we can praise you in the midst of our gathering. I ask your blessing upon all those gathered here and the work that we are about to see accomplished. May our focus be on building a community that is safe, about building a place where people can feel welcome, about a place where people can gather. May our focus be on loving you and loving others in the midst of all that we do. And so as we go about this evening, Holy Spirit, come and be present with us in all that we do and all that we say. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item number 3, special matters and announcements. Yes, got some items.
At the request of one of the board of supervisors, I just want to go through item number 2C on there about the people with hidden disabilities, this Collins law. This county board actually on September 17th, 2008 passed a resolution asking this to be brought up through Mark Serby at the National Association of Counties. There's only 2 states in the union that have hidden disabilities registration for your driver's license. It's Florida and Wisconsin. And it's called Collins Law, and it's named after Colin, I can't remember his last name, young man from Rice Lake who was pulled over, has a driver's license, but has hidden disabilities. And there was a slight misunderstanding between himself and law enforcement, resulted in his mother getting the state legislature to pass Collins Law. So in meeting with her, his mother, we brought this to this county board and it was passed here. It was brought on to the National Association of Counties and it's now on their platform. And thank you, Mark, for doing that. So I just wanted to update the county board on that. And then, I've laid out some very important things here. Item D, interestingly enough, on Assembly Bill 374 with the opioid legislation, if you figure this out, the state's share of doing nothing is $65 million. $65 million. That's more than $1. That's a lot of money. So upcoming things to talk, that will probably be on the agenda for August already. Deanne already will probably be talking redistricting with Rhonda Sukis because the governor on Friday vetoed the law that would have changed for one cycle how the aldermanic districts and wards are settled and how supervisory districts are settled because the Census Bureau was Census Bureau is to get the data to the counties in the United States of America by April 1st or thereafter. Then under Wisconsin law, by July 1st, or to have a tentative plan ready to go, so that by September county board meeting, we have a final plan that starts the 60 days ticking for municipalities to pass their ward boundaries or to disagree with what we're going to do for supervisory districts. Well, it is now July 19th, and there's still nothing from the Census Bureau, and the earliest we're going to get it is, the very earliest date we would get it is August 23rd. So I will probably prepare you, we'll probably have at least one special meeting in September for county board and probably one in November as a result of not getting the census data. Because there has to be 60 days turnaround time from the time that the county board accepts the tentative plan, which would be September 15th. And so then that sometime the first week of November, we'd have to meet to have the finalized plan, so that the finalized plan is approved by the state of Wisconsin on November 23rd. So that's the dates we're looking at. So that's some stuff that's up. Thank you.
And I do, Jeff had it in his special matters and announcements, but I want to publicly thank our executive director of our Economic Development Corp., Dave Armstrong, who's also our local assemblyman. And I want to thank him for getting the tipping fees and that Barron Diagnostic Lab. And I know it's because he's pushing down in Madison for us, so thanks, Dave. Item number 4, approve the agenda. What I'd like to do is, on item number 9, put all 3 of them as one motion. Does anybody have any issues with doing that? If not, could I get a motion to approve the agenda with all 3 items under zoning in one motion? Motion by Supervisor Thompson, seconded by Supervisor Hanson. Any other concerns? Not all those in favor of approving the agenda indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? That motion's carried. Number 5, approve the minutes of June 21st, 2021. Motion by Supervisor Olson, seconded by Supervisor Renzi. Any problems with any of it? Not all those in favor of passing the minutes of June 21, 2021 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? That motion's carried. Public comment, we do not have any. Item number 7, Barron County Housing Authority Rehabilitation Project, presentation on the tax credit funding. Tom Landgraf with Dimension Development LLC is here to give us a lot of good information, along with him is Meg Skemp, our Executive Director of the Barron County Housing. Meg is here primarily to answer any specific questions about our plan. So with that, Mr. Landgraf, you come up to the podium and hope the mic's on.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm honored to be here. I've been doing affordable housing for a long time in Wisconsin, and this is the first time that I have heard of a county board taking this time to drill down and identify the issues and try to understand a very complex topic. So I applaud you, and I hope that there will be others that follow behind you to be able to figure this out. It's a highly competitive process, both in Wisconsin and nationally, and being able to understand how the scoring and how the money comes together is critical. So again, I think what you're doing tonight is super, and I'm very honored to be able to work with you on kind of walking through what's going on. Jody is my assistant here. Her batteries are low on her mouse, so I don't have it here. She's got it, so we're going to be talking a lot back and forth. So sorry about that. So Dimension Development, it's a small company. You're basically looking at it right now. So wherever I'm on the internet and on the phone, I'm in the office, so to speak. Affordable housing nationally is what some people refer to as a cottage industry. And inside that cottage industry, I'm a niche player. And I work only with community development organizations, housing authorities like MEG, and sometimes directly with local governments that don't have a housing authority but want to see something done. Let's see, why don't you go to the next? There we go. Okay. So we've been doing it since 2003. Got about 1,600 and some odd units, and at 30 and 50 units a pop, that's a lot of deals in a lot of small communities. And as I indicated, our work is entirely with affordable housing, so working with HUD and USDA Rural Development and WIDA and other organizations is the universe. I do that for about half-time. The other half, I teach 3 classes at the UW-Madison School of Business, mainly graduating seniors and grad students, about 170 or so a year between both semesters. And the 3 classes are residential property development, green sustainable development, and a general campus-wide class on affordable housing. And then I also, to kind of get my rural touch if I don't do it enough with housing, I am a paramedic and I work with the city of Middleton filling in for the full-timers when they're ill. And we get a lot of calls out into rural Dane County, so I probably spend half my time as a medic dodging deer coming up out of the ditch. They don't pay attention to sirens and lights either. So let's go to the next one. Okay, you have seen this slide before. Jody's going to talk a little bit about some financing, but at the end of the day, the market rate development right here, roughly half of the rent. So think of this as somebody paying $1,000 a month for an apartment. Roughly half of that, $500, goes to pay for the borrowed money that the developer got from the bank to build the development. So if there was no borrowed money, the rent wouldn't be $1,000, it would be $500. So the whole goal of the National Affordable Housing Program now, since the 1986 Tax Act, is to reduce the impact of the debt. And either it's reduced by replacing it with housing tax credits, or it's reduced by some other source of financing that would come in to lighten the load. And Jeff put together a position paper, which is in your packet, on a couple of different scenarios. He was kind enough to share it with me, offered to let me make suggestions. He put all of my suggestions in italics in the report, and as you can see, there wasn't much of his comments that I left untouched. Figuring this is the last time I'll see Jeff, and here I am talking to the county board. So I may go down in the Guinness Book of World Records as the person who suggests modifications to the county administrator and lives through it. So in that process, Jeff wrote that position paper before he and I ever talked, and he came up and through his research was with exactly the issue that we'll talk about tonight, and that is where's the borrowed money in the transaction and what's the impact on the rent. So he arrived at that conclusion coming from an entirely different direction. We both end up in the same place, and I think that's probably one of the reasons we're here talking to you tonight, because that is the numero uno significant piece. Now you can see in the market rate development right here, there's a lot of borrowed money, and over in the tax credit development, there's a lot less. And the big reason is this chunk right here, which is the affordable housing tax credits, which replace a decent chunk of that borrowed money. So at the end of the day, what the Housing Authority is contemplating doing, and what the county may be in a position to assist the Housing Authority to do, is to go apply to WIDA for an allocation of the housing tax credits to fill up this chunk of the pie and reduce the debt load. So at the end of the day, that's really where the rubber hits the road. So Jody, to just put it in context, we're talking about the initial portfolio here, which the County Housing Authority has, which is what's referred to as Section 8 project-based rental assistance. That's 70 units in a number of different communities, but you also have some other affordable housing in the county that is eligible for tax credits. It's a little bit more complex to work with, but I thought I'd just put it on the list. And I saw, as I forgot Turtle Lake, which belongs here, but Rice Lake, Cumberland, Barron, Chetek, and Turtle Lake have something called public housing, which is also referred to as 1937 Act housing. So this is an act that was signed into law by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Gives you an idea how far back in the history this goes. And that's a program that was initially the only program that the US government had. And as you can see, it came in 1937, right after the Great Depression, and as the country was trying to, guess we're gonna get it here, right here, as the country was trying to get out of tremendous homelessness. This was basically the Homeless Housing Act back in 1937. It was supposed to be temporary. It was going to go away shortly after everyone kind of got going again, but it's still here. And HUD is trying very hard now to kind of bring that to a conclusion. So you'll be hearing more about public housing, especially from these 5 communities when I get Turtle Lake on the list. There's also some USDA Section 515 housing around, and then there's the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program for the county. That's also administered by MEG. One of the nice benefits of the 1986 Tax Act, which created the Affordable Housing Tax Credits, is it just created the source of the tax credits and the way that they are allocated. Each state comes up with its own scenario of how to allocate tax credits. So Alaska has some different needs than Wisconsin. We have different needs than Puerto Rico, and those 3 have different needs than the state of Maine. So each state comes up with its own criteria. The credits are the same across all of the states. And interestingly enough, the largest affordable housing program in the country since 1986 is administered by the Internal Revenue Service, not by HUD, not by Rural Development, and not by any other governmental agency. What is the beauty of it is each state gets to decide what to do. So you can use these credits to fix up existing housing. You can use these credits to buy housing that's not affordable right now and make it affordable. You can use it to build new housing. You can do any combination of that. Initially, the plan is to use it to fix up the 70-unit portfolio that the county has. But just keep in mind, we're talking about that, but it doesn't mean that the only universe of affordable housing is going to be existing housing that you have, because unlike every other county, I'm sure, in the country, would like to see more workforce affordable housing built. You can do that as well. That's just, you got to do one thing at a time. So the portfolio in question here is the one that the County Housing Authority, that MEG operates. You can see it's made up of 1-bedroom units in these communities, and then some 3-bedroom units in Barron. So the first application, if everything goes the way that we're contemplating, it would be to submit an application to substantially renovate these properties. They were built in the late 70s or early 70s, I guess, and they still have the same kitchen cabinets, and there've been certainly upgrades with regard to appliances, but nothing significant has happened to the housing since 1970, and that's a long time. So it's about time for something to happen there. Jody? So here's an agenda. I always like to let people know what's coming, because this is going to be kind of like drinking water out of a fire hose once we get going. We've got WIDA to deal with. We've got federal agencies like HUD, and we've got the Internal Revenue Service. They all have their rules and regulations, none of which any of us can change, so we just have to figure out how to dodge and weave between them. But ultimately, the goal is in December to submit the application to WIDA. They'll inform everybody in probably May of 2022, and then assuming everything is successful, you'll get an allocation of the federal credits, and then the heavy lifting starts to actually put the transaction in place. So we're talking today, and then the expectation is that in August, and as early August as possible, to get kind of a thumbs up that this sounds like a good idea, and let's start moving. You can stop anytime, and you can even, before WIDA makes the decision in May, pull back the application. So just because the app goes in doesn't mean you're stuck. So if things change here, then obviously things change, and we'll just have to work with that. Jody? So what's needed? This is the same test that's needed for every affordable housing application in the country. So it's nothing that's unique to you or unique to Wisconsin. You've got to have the land under control. Currently do. The Housing Authority owns it. It needs to be properly zoned. It is. It's built. It's occupied. That's an excellent thing. We need to get a market study that shows demand. We all know there's demand there, but the Congress requires that there be a market study. Unfortunately, this is something that'll be interesting reading. You already have seen a Barron County Housing Authority that you've already went out and looked at ahead of time to figure out what you want to do. Lots of other material that'll be coming through the process. And then the last bullet point here is a critical one. Congress requires that there be no high-speed lenses and mirrors and funny business with allocating credits. So they require that each state come up with a scoring exhibit. So it would be like me, the first day of class, if the class said, hey, we're gonna have a final exam, and I'd say yes, and they'd say, well, would you give us the questions that will be on the final? I would say yes. And then somebody might say, would you also give us the answers? And I would say yes. So that's the way it works nationally. Every allocating agency like WIDA has to tell everyone like you exactly how to get an A on the exam. So it's not at the end of the day, you apply for credits and don't get them and you say why, and you get a bunch of people staring at their shoes and you don't really know. They lay out everything that needs to be done. There's one big variable in Wisconsin for garnering enough points. And WIDA does it based on points. They take all the applications, they score them, and then they look at the credits available. Each application asks for different credits, and they just start putting the credits into the deals in the order they ranked them until they run out of credits, and that's it. So you got to get up in the money. But WIDA tells us how to get in the money, and the biggest category that has flexibility is a soft financing category. And that's what Jody's going to talk about, because you, in essence, have the ability to adjust how many of those points you want. So that's why we're talking money, because at the end of the day, decisions made here by you will dictate how many of those points Meg can put on the application. And obviously, we want to try to get the most points, but not break the bank.
And you will guide us in that effort.
What's that?
You will guide us in that.
Well, yeah, yes, I will do what I can. I'm sure I'll have a lot of people asking questions too. So that's really where the rubber hits the road. And I think that's our last slide. Oh, this is one that I put in just basically dealing with risk in the transaction. And typically, you know, you've all heard the saying, if we build it, will they come? So if we build this building, will people actually want to live here? If it's new construction, that's a good question. But you already have a waiting list, and I think your public housing is, and the Section 8 waiting lists are 2 to 3 years. Yeah, so if you got on Meg's list today, maybe 3 years from now, she'd call you and say, we have a unit. Well, you're not going to be waiting in your car for 3 years, so you've gone off and done other things. So not only is the property completely occupied, but there's a huge waiting list. So that one's off the table as a risk. The second one is it's already built, but it's going to be substantially rehabbed. So we have to get that done properly. And then the incomes and assets of the folks in the buildings need to be certified pursuant to Congress's rules that the IRS administers. And of course, that's what the Housing Authority does every morning when it gets out of bed. So it's nothing new for them. So in that regard, rehabbing an existing building with a long waiting list is about as, there's obviously risk. I don't mean to suggest that there isn't, but in the degree of risk, it's way down toward the bottom. So as your first time in the deep end of the pool, you're going in with a transaction that has a lot of typical real estate development risk already out of the deal. So I think that's a mess. So I went 5 minutes over. Jeff said he was gonna send the book out, and I see him reaching for it, so. So I did it. Questions?
So the idea is that by having these credits that wealthy investors purchase and then put money into the project, we lower the amount of borrowing that the county has to have. Is that in essence the?
Yep. And as I was driving on Highway 8, I drove past the Verizon telephone office. A huge investor in tax credits nationally is Verizon. There are not many individuals who buy the credits. Most banks, everybody every insurance company you see advertising on TV, Nationwide, State Farm, Allstate, they all buy credits. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all the major banks buy them. And basically we'll use Verizon since I know they have a store here. They've got some tax people, and the tax people say, well, okay, we're gonna pay $100 million of federal income tax. We don't want to pay $100 million of federal income tax. How can we get out of paying it without going to jail? The answer is they can go buy some affordable housing tax credits from the local housing authority. And Meg will give them a form that they hook onto their tax return. It's called an 8609. And that form gives them a pass on paying those tax credits. They get a permanent pass. So in other words, they never have to pay those credits as long as Meg keeps the property operating correctly and all of the incomes certified correctly of the people living there. So Verizon says, if you do that, we'll let you keep our $100 million. So that tax credit is basically a grant. But it doesn't turn into a grant until the end of the compliance period, which is 15 years long. So that's the other reason you go after the credits, because you don't have to pay them back. A bank, you have to pay back. Tax credit investors, you don't. There's about $3 billion of tax credits that are awarded annually in the country, and it's substantially oversubscribed. There will be probably 50, 55 applicants for maybe enough credits for 20 or 25 deals. So 2 out of 3 people go home disappointed. So the goal is to try to hit
I
it the
see
first
in your
time.
position paper, you said that these credits provide 50 to 60% of the total cost. If we were talking 70 units at $100,000, that's $7 million total to rehab all these units. You're saying 50 to 65% of that amount would be covered by these tax credits.
Correct.
How about, is there also grants on top of that, or is that already included in that 50 to 60?
Oh, no, we can go to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago and get an AHP grant, which is factored in. We can go to the Department of Administration, who administers the Federal Home Program. That, by the way, in the Biden stimulus, the first Biden stimulus plan, has a lot of extra bucks in it for both new construction and for rental. The other major sources are smaller, but there are some. There's a lot of rocks. Even though I'm one person, I've got a heck of a Rolodex of where all the rocks are and whose money is under each one.
And you have a fairly good idea of our chance at getting those via the point system. I imagine they have a point system for that as well.
Yep. Yeah, the granddaddy of the points will be the WIDA scoring exhibit. Now, they've issued it for 2021, so we know what it is, and Meg and I and some of our board folks will be going through it. We won't get to the end of August and not have a good flavor for where the Housing Authority's tax credit application is going to score. And if it's not going to score in the money, there's no sense in going forward.
So, in Jeff's paper, he said they had three solutions, and one of it, B, had authorized the staff and the Housing Authority Committee to proceed with the process of rehabilitation using low-income housing tax credits. Is there any reason we shouldn't do that today, authorize that to happen? You're gonna look at all the data, analyze the stuff, and come back and tell us if you want to. So is there any reason we shouldn't proceed?
There isn't a reason from an operational standpoint, because we know what the next step is, and after that, what the next step is. The only thing I can think of is if there was some angst. This is not gonna be a small transaction. It could be, at least 7 million. It could be higher. The county may have some financing in it. We can get at it in earnest if you did that tonight. But certainly, I would put a caveat in to say, if you're going to do something, I see Jeff looking here because I'm now going to give you an idea what to put in your resolution. Not only do I get to tell him what he might want to change in his issue paper, but I think what you would want to do is put a caveat in to say, if you're going to cut us loose to go do something, it isn't final until you make it final, and that would be in August. I would want to talk to you again, or at least have Jeff talk to you about where we ended up, and then
So we have an August 16th meeting, so what you're saying is at that time, if we decide tonight to make a motion to proceed, that in August, we have a formal resolution that would guide us.
Yeah.
What?
And that first example you gave, you said $1,000 rent, and you cut to 500. But on the two pie charts, it looks like it's gonna be 2/3 rather than half. Or are there other colors that are gonna keep the rent down?
And if you go back to that pie chart, I think I know the question you're asking, because the math might not quite add up. The chart on the left was a market rate development, not an affordable development. So if somebody's going to be building market rate housing and they're going to rent it for, and I always use $1,000 because we can all do that in our head pretty quick. If there was no debt at all, the rent would drop to 500. Now, the difference between Section 8 housing and the public housing in Turtle Lake and Chetek and Cumberland, Rice Lake, is that when HUD, back in 1937, authorized the law, they put in 100% of the money. So there never was any debt in public housing. So if you go talk to Matt Bay, Meg's counterpart in Rice Lake, and say, what are your one-bedroom apartments rent for? He might say $300. Meg, in her 70-unit portfolio, might say 550, and you'd say, what's the difference? Meg has debt on her portfolio. Public housing has no debt. So that's the reason that it's such a stark thing. Now, there is no more HUD money. They stopped putting money into public housing a long time ago, and they also stopped putting money in to fix it up. So there's about a $33 billion national backlog of things that need to be done to housing like you have in Chetek, in Barron, and Cumberland, and Rice Lake, which is why those housing authorities are looking at exiting, and why HUD is saying, please do. They are literally pushing them out the door because HUD knows that they've lost their grip on running public housing, and especially the small housing authorities that don't have a lot of extra horsepower. They made them a deal they can't refuse, basically, to look at getting out.
I have more of a comment on procedure here. I don't think we can vote on something if we don't have it on the agenda.
I guess that's probably correct, I guess I'd probably ask, is there any way that would disagree with us proceeding with the resolution for next month. Maybe something like
I got a
Yep.
question. Now, you sit there and you said there that the money is available here for, going to be for 15 years, but it's not a grant until after the 15 years. Is there any time in there that can be, renege on it or whatever?
that. Ask us to cough up the money.
Oh, yes, it's an excellent question. The IRS has been, surprise, surprise, very specific about exactly what happens when, in the example of the $7 million transaction where there's $5 million of tax credits.
Yeah.
So, what causes you to lose some of the $5 million? All of the issues ultimately come back right here to Barron. The housing authority messes up how they certify the incomes of the people moving into the property. Now, they do that every day. They've been doing it since they were a housing authority. They can do it in their sleep. So as long as the board and the housing authority ED are doing what they have been doing correctly, and HUD watches them very carefully, and Meg has a perfect score with HUD. So that's issue number one. If you put the wrong folks in the tax credit housing. The second, and that's an ongoing thing. Each year there's a certification of the income. The other big one is a one-time risk, and that is that the contractor who's hired to do the work doesn't understand the tax credit program. Because there's a window of opportunity that all the rehab has to be done. And it has to be done in time for Meg to get the units that have been rehabbed, reoccupied. And if that doesn't happen, there is either a loss per unit, or if there are enough units in the building that miss the mark, all the units in the building get tossed. So the contractor is a big issue. So the first question is that you would ask, if there's that kind of risk, have you ever done this before? Unfortunately, there won't be a contractor in Barron that can say yes. It doesn't mean that all of the folks that work on housing and mechanicals and electrical are now out. What we do in that regard is we use a construction manager. So there's somebody at the top end who does understand tax credits and has done a lot of them. And then they will hire the local folks, the electricians, the plumbers, the drywallers, to do their piece. But that'll all be choreographed by the construction manager, who is known to Rita, Rita has to approve the team, and also has a track record. So they have some successes that can be evaluated. So what that means, as I know a lot of you probably, well, maybe some of you work in the trades, or you know people who do. If there's a $5 million construction contract, roughly 3% of that is the construction manager's piece. 97% flows down to the folks doing the work, the drywallers, the excavators, the cement people, and other stuff. So if those folks all show up and say, I'll work on that transaction, and here's my bid, and they're in the money, the vast majority, in my math, 97% approximately, is going to stay local. Even though when somebody says the general contractor isn't from here, that doesn't mean that they're bringing all their folks in. Because we've worked out a transaction with anybody who's going to be the construction manager to first hire local. And if nobody local shows up, then obviously we've got that window we have to deal with, so then they have to put other people in. So local folks will get the first shot at it. And we also will try to do a job fair to get all of the subs that get hired, the electricians, the plumbers, everybody else, to all kind of set up at the same place. So anybody who wants to get working in one of the trades can go talk to them. Because there will be a requirement that we try to get as many folks that aren't unfamiliar with the trades in the trades. Now, of course, they're very busy right now, so there probably aren't a lot of folks walking around who don't have an opportunity, but sometimes they just don't know who to talk to. So we're gonna also try to set up some sort of a job fair or whatever, so that local folks that would like to try to get started in the trades, regardless of what they are, have a shot at it. So,
All right.
Federal wage rates have to reflect.
Will what?
Davis-Bacon.
Davis-Bacon,
Congress did not include Davis-Bacon in the low-income housing tax credits. But prevailing wage, which in many communities I work in is higher than Davis-Bacon, is what's paid. So if there's a prevailing wage here for the electricians in Barron, that's the number.
Any additional questions? Hey, Tom, you did an excellent job. Bob? Okay. Go ahead.
Are we talking about working on, let's get past all of the preliminaries and work is about to begin. Are we working on all 70 units at the same time, displacing all of these folks into the community somewhere?
No. What would probably happen is Meg would work with the construction manager to figure out what is the best number of units to work on. Now, if it's a 2-story building, the plumbing on the first floor and the plumbing on the second floor are right above each other. So in that case, you empty the building on a vertical basis, so you can do the plumbing on both floors versus horizontally. What typically would happen is on the 70-unit portfolio, if 15 units at a time was the right number in a building or a series of buildings, either those units, or the folks in those units would get moved somewhere temporarily, and the cost of doing that is in the budget. That's a challenge sometimes. So what typically housing authorities do is they just don't release 15 units. So they wait for the current occupant to leave, and then they don't fill it until it's rehab. And then there's usually a rolling rehab where people get moved around. Most of the property is older adults and folks with disabilities. And frequently housing authorities that I work with will go to the resident and say, if you'd like to move back with family for a period of time, we'll pay to move you, we'll put your stuff in storage, and we'll give you some cash to do that. So somebody might say, okay, I'll go live with my kids for 4 weeks while they fix my apartment, and then I'll come back. And we put money in the budget to be able to pay for all that, so that isn't on the resident's back to do that. If it's a family property or an older adult that doesn't have family, it's real easy to rent a room in a motel, but as you probably know from talking to folks that live in property that are occupied by older adults, their support network is the person next to them. So if we pull them out of one of Meg's building and put them in a hotel, they're lost there. So unless we could move 4 or 5 people who know each other at the same time, which is a challenge, we typically do the rolling rehab.
And do folks typically, do they stick around long enough to go back in, or are they looking for other accommodations other than what we have provided to them? What kind of ratios are there on things? That happen a lot?
No, but what does happen a lot is this scenario, and I'll bet you all a cup of coffee will happen here in Barron, is when the music starts playing at the building and the contractors are there and there's dust and there's noise and people are saying, oh my goodness gracious, what's going on in there? They won't be particularly happy. We try to get the first unit done very quickly. It's a model unit. and then the residents can all come in and take a look at it. And then what happens is Meg's phone rings off the hook saying, how can I get moved up on the list? Trust me, if we get credits a year and a half from now, we can talk about that, but Meg will probably tell you that's exactly what goes on. The disruption to life as residents know it is significant. But when they can see that they got all new cabinets and all new appliances and their unit's been reconfigured and they can actually get a wheelchair and walk, which they can't now, I mean, that makes a big difference.
Any additional questions? Nice job, Tom. Is there anybody here that doesn't think we should proceed with developing a resolution in August to further with the process we've been talking about here to get the low-income housing credits for our 70 units?
Hopefully, I think it'd be good if Jody showed just the effect that 3.5 million, 7 million that has in our levy, or debt levy, and then the individual cost to homeowners. Is that appropriate?
Well, maybe we can do it next time.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. I guess Megan and Tom, you got your marching orders, the board likes you.
Okay.
So, we should go forward.
Just one thing I didn't mention, and I don't think it's going to be a problem, but we intend to try to set the units up to put as much renewable energy in. It's likely going to be solar on the roofs or ground mounted. I'm a major fan of that.
And Megan indicated that in the paper she supplied to us as well.
So you can expect to see some renewable energy in what we come up with as well. So I think.
Thank both of you.
Yeah. So Jeff, you had.
I think let's make this talk. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say.
Are you good, Meg?
Yeah, I don't have anything else unless anyone has questions.
We can show those financials next month. Okay.
All right, we'll get a resolution developed and we'll look at the financials and go from there. And thanks very much. You did an excellent job and I like your program so far.
Well, thank you for taking the time. As I mentioned before, I don't know of another county board that has gotten this far into it. So you need to pat yourself on the back. It's a complicated subject that a lot of people run away from and say somebody else ought to figure it out. So I'm honored to be working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary?
Is there a national, default rate of contractors not complying and finishing what they're supposed to do, where you run into that issue of, is there a, because this is so new around here, obviously, we don't have anybody used to doing it.
I don't know of a national rate, but the quality of the contractor and the capability of the contractor is probably the most carefully examined piece of the whole puzzle. The investors will look at it. Verizon has a group of folks who do nothing but monitor all of the tax credits that they're investing in. The attorneys and accountants that work for Verizon look at that stuff. The investor who represents Verizon looks at it. WIDA looks at it. And the Housing Authority Board will look at it. So this is, selecting the contractor is probably the most critical piece. That's where the big money is in the transaction. So if you're writing a check because somebody failed, you don't worry about writing the check because the landscaper didn't get the trees in the right place. That's a check, but it's not a big one. It's the contractor who's probably, of the $7 million transaction, there'll be 5 million of it. So that's where the rubber hits the road. I've never had one come anywhere close to that, in part because we've carefully looked at folks. A lot of people will say, well, how hard can that be? Just building it and remodeling it isn't a challenge, because if you were a general contractor and you were hired by Bob here to build you something, or build him something, he'd give you a budget, and then you're kind of in charge. So if it's not happening the way Bob thought it should happen, he'll talk to you and he'll say, well, I'm on it, Bob, And then at the end of the day, to make him happy, you'll show up and say, I built it under budget. Verizon, I'm using them as an example, will get as upset if this building comes in under budget as they will if it comes in over budget. Because they're buying tax credits based on what is spent. So not only does the contractor have to get it done on time, they can't go over and they can't go under. And that's not something a lot of contractors are. Everybody's worried about going under, but nobody ever gets mad at it because they went under. Well, in this particular case, it's,
And investors always buy up all the tax credits, that there's a liability if they don't, they're not all sold, correct?
well, the tax credits are always oversubscribed. Assuming this works the way we think it will, when WIDA publishes the list, and I can get Mega List and Jeff, and they can send it out, so you can see what the actual list looks like, and you can see where WIDA cuts the line off, and everybody who's below the line who gets nothing. But over on the far right-hand side, it'll be the contact information. So the investors who are interested in buying tax credits in Wisconsin get that. Every state has to publish it. So you may well be getting a lot of calls from people who will say, where's Bear in Wisconsin? You know, but I see you have $5 million worth of tax credits and I'm your buyer. So she'll be real popular.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, item number 8, update on our highway facilities project. Mark Survey, our highway commissioner.
Good evening. Jody was projecting earlier some drone flights from the construction site. Those updates are put on, is it every 3 weeks, Jeff?
No, every other.
Every other week?
Yep.
The drone flights are put on the website for you to look at and see the progress. The last one that was up was they were actually doing some tilt-up construction. That was kind of neat to see. It's a longer 5 or 6 minute video, but they condensed about 45 minutes into that, so you can see how they actually unload one of the panels and stand it up and set it. It's kind of interesting. I've just been happier than heck looking out the window and seeing that 230-ton crane, because that goes back to my bridge building days. So, but where we're at right now, we've been working on the west side primarily. The wash bay is the building that's the tall building that's set now. All of that building is set. The roof, they're working on the roof right now. They're working on inside with electrical and plumbing. That building is kind of now falling into where the flooring and stuff will start to get put in. We are working on the unheated storage building, which is where the vehicles from, ADRC and the government center will be housed. That's the building that would be to the west of the unheated storage that we have on the west side right now. The foundation work is done on that. We took structural steel deliveries today. I think there was 6 loads of material that was unloaded. And they're working on the floor. In that particular building, they pour the concrete floor before they do any of the steel erection and the wall erection. So they're gonna be working we're hoping mid-August we should have floor in that. And then they'll be moving into the wash bay at the same time and working in that. They've got working on floor drains and things. The plumber today is typically unhappy about the floor drains because they're a pain in the butt to set the floor drains. You set them in the sand and you pour the concrete around them, and you gotta get them to grade but you don't have the floor there to match yet. So everything's set by laser, and typically plumbers aren't happy about having to do that. I wouldn't be either, but so that at our meeting today, he was grousing about that a little bit, but we're working hard on that. So primarily where we've been is on the west side. On the east side of Highway 25, where our main facility is, if you've seen, we did demos on the old bridge building, the old salt shed, and the Rudd building, which was in the back by the trailer court. Those have been taken down to the slabs, and that's as far as we can go. You may or may not have heard that we had some permit issues on the east side of the road. What transpired was, before we hired or even sent out the RFP for the original study, Our staff in the highway office looked through, everything we could find. Is there any historical, is there any archaeological, is there any, environmental concerns on the site? You know, any wells, anything of that nature? Nothing flagged, okay? When we did we have to get a stormwater permit from the DNR to do the grading. Okay? We obtained a stormwater permit in 2018 for the west side when we did the fuel system over there. And we tore down the old shop, the old salt shed, the old sign shop, and then about a year later, the old office was removed. Okay? Nothing flagged in the DNR process at that time. However, in 2011, our buildings were listed on the historical register. So the first question I asked was, okay, you're saying we have 5 buildings that are listed, 4 of which were on the west side, which are now gone. Where am I gonna serve my time? They said, well, we're not concerned about that now, we're concerned about what's on the east side and how we're gonna mitigate that. So we've been going through, let me step back for a second. Our original plan has always been, when we tore down the old office building, there was a soapstone monument above that. I think it said Washburn County Highway Commission, or Barron County Highway Commission, excuse me, I'm in the other county. Barron County Highway Commission.
He also built the Washburn.
That's why you're on triple D.
Yeah. But we were saving that one, and then the one that's above the highway shop right now that says Barron County Highway. We were saving that one, and we planned on putting those somewhere on the site. We planned on creating a time capsule. We have some old pictures of the site, from years ago. So we had planned on doing all of that, never having to formally commit to that, but we had all along been going to be doing that. So the environmental or historical folks got involved. What happened is DNR wouldn't approve the grading permit until the historical folks signed off on it. So CBS Squared had to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with SHPO and got that taken care of as of last week. We have now cleared the SHPO requirements, and now we're into the final stages with the DNR permit, which is their final review, and they've been looking at it since April. We've had a few comments we had to address the end of last week, but we think we're at the end of that. We're hoping any day we're going to get a permit issued. I'm very hopeful that by the end of the month we will have a permit issued and we'll be going. Interestingly enough, the mitigation that we had to agree to in writing with SHPO was to save the 2 stones and use them on the site, put a cornerstone in with a time capsule. And the caveat, what the other one is we have the old plans for the existing shop. We have on a Mylar, which is how they used to draw. It's kind of like a clear paper and it's all inked on it. You can see through it. So you look at one page at a time. We're going to take that and make a wallpaper mural out of that for in the conference room. And that satisfies everybody's needs. We're going to take those old Mylar plans and put them in the time capsule. And so we should be through that. But it's been interesting. I can't get any grayer, so I can't say that added to me. But it is what it is. It's part of the process. It did not, CBS Squared looked at it also. They did the same thing that we did. We went to the sites. It sounds like it's quite convoluted and quite buried to find out if you're on the sites or not. After we get the permit, I'm going to try to figure out how this got missed and how we can make sure it doesn't happen again. I told Jeff, I said his house is built in 1930, I think you said, Jeff. So apparently I could just call SHPO up and say, hey, I know there's a 1930 house and get it listed. And this is the caveat. When it was listed in 2011, we were never informed. So we had no clue that was there. Otherwise, we could have reacted to that. We'd have had that in our sites. We would have gone forward knowing that and been addressing it all along. The permit we got in 2018 the stormwater permit from the DNR. This was listed in 2011, did not cite anything special that we needed to do, so it was really out of the blue that this came at us. So like I said, we're hoping now, any day, hopefully by the end of the month, we're gonna have our permit. The contractors have been very good to work with. They've all committed to bringing in additional forces when we get the east side available, because obviously that's the bigger site. We're building a roughly 4-acre building over there. There's approximately a half a mile of concrete precast wall to set over there. There's a lot of work to be done. You have to pour the footings, you have to get the walls up, you gotta get the roof system on. We get that done, that's our goal. We get that complete before weather closes us in. Then you can temporarily heat the inside of the building, and you can keep going all winter long inside the building. The key is gonna be, it's kind of hard to heat a building without a roof on it. So that's kind of where we're at. We also are now aware that there's, when they started tearing the roof apart, shouldn't say tearing the roof apart. We can't tear the building down. We can take the inside of the building, which we've done in the old shop. The mechanics are now moved to the west side of that building. There's a temporary wall built in there. And the inside of that has the bridge crane is gone, everything that's gone, the heating, ventilating systems, everything that's not the building is gone. But in the course of them doing that removal and taking some of the vents out, they came across what they thought was asbestos in the roof. And that came back now as tested as being asbestos, so we have a contract that's being let next Thursday for asbestos removal. That will do with the roof of the building. It's not the whole roof, there's one layer roof system. So, again, the website has progress on it. If you ever would like to take a tour of the site, right now, Punky does a drive-by. So she can see everything she needs to see from Taylor and 25 and River. So you can, that's always an option to you. But if you'd like to see the site at any time, you can contact me. I'll set it up so that we maybe go after hours or at a break time or something. But what we're saying is just please do not wander onto the site on your own volition. Make sure that you set up an appointment with me. We'll get you the proper safety equipment, hard hat, vest. We'll keep you in the areas that are safe where you're not at risk. And we certainly would be willing to do that at any time to show you the progress.
Isn't there a highway facilities meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock?
There is, yes.
Part of that agenda includes the tour.
Yes.
So if anybody's interested and want to go on that tour, 9 o'clock tomorrow at the highway shop.
Yeah, the facility committee meeting meets at 9 tomorrow. Probably half an hour or 45 minutes approximately for the meeting, and then we'll go do a tour for anybody that's interested. So, but outside of that, if you ever want to see the site, call me up. We can see what we can really get you into. But right now, there's, like I say, everything's confined pretty much to the west side.
But I would say that I'd rather see them try to go to the highway facility. If you're busy enough,
Yeah.
you don't need to be in private.
Well, if I had individuals calling, I'd try to get them together in a group and say, let's wait till we have 5 and then let's go or something like that. So.
Some suppliers during the COVID, like cars, couldn't get the chips and things. Did anything like that apply to some of these contracts for supplies?
That I'm hearing as of now, no. When we get into installing heating systems and things like that, are we gonna have capacitor shortages? Who knows? But right now, the primary thing was everybody was concerned more about the cost of the building materials rather than the availability. We did get in queue like for the steel buildings. One is delivered and the other one is in fabrication. So, those prices were locked in as soon as the contract, when we placed the order, so that we could make sure we got to the front of the line and also the best price that you could. So,
As you can tell in our last meeting, when Mark talked about buying his equipment ahead of time, he's always on top of this stuff, as well as CBS Square. And I believe that county close to us is like $5 million over budget. Where what Mark's done and CBS Squared has mitigated that issue for us. Any other further questions for Mark? Okay, thanks, Mark.
All right.
Great job.
That time, see you later. 4:30 comes early.
Okay, item number 9, the zoning ordinance amendments for the 3 zonings. Could I get a motion to approve all 3? Motion by Supervisor Rogers, second by Supervisor Banks. Is there any discussion on any of these? Not, all those in favor of approving that motion, all 3 of them, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? That motion is carried. Item number 10, the resolution authorizing improvement to Ann Street School. Can I get a motion to approve that? Motion by Supervisor Rizig, seconded by Supervisor Heller. Stacy, did you want to speak to that, or you want to just do questions?
Yeah, I would take any questions. I don't have anything specifically that I need to address regarding that.
Okay. I mean, Jeff did a good job with his position paper on it. You know, I think a valuable piece of property and a good building, and we can utilize it. So, does anybody have any questions or concerns or further discussion relative to it? Not, all those in favor then? This one? Oh, excuse me. The next 3, in case I blow it again, they're all going to be roll call, and we need 2/3 vote. So let's take roll call on item number 10, resolution authorizing improvements to Ann Street School.
John Horst.
Yes.
Bill Efforts.
Yes.
Bert Skinner.
Yes.
Bill Heimke.
Yes.
Bob Rogers.
Yes.
Oscar Schob.
Yes.
John Banks.
Yes.
Terry Lee.
Yes.
Carolyn Bartlett.
Yes.
Pam Paul.
Yes.
Bill Schredel.
Yes.
Gary Taxcom.
Yes.
Jim Gores.
Yep.
Gary Nelson.
Yes.
Roberta Mosenty.
Yes.
Pete Olson.
Yes.
Steve Johnson.
Yes.
Carol Moen.
Yes.
Eric Panier.
You there?
Yes.
Steve Lincoln.
Is that-
Yes.
That's a yes.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah. Good job,
Russ
Mark.
Renzick.
Okay.
Russ Renzick.
Yes.
Todd Gerlin.
Yes.
Jerry McRoberts.
Yes.
Mark Thompson.
Yes.
Von Hansen.
Yes.
Stacy Wenzel.
Yes.
Steve Lincoln.
Okay. We'll go, yeah.
Yes.
Jay Heller.
Yes.
Bob Anderson.
Yes.
Sam Buchanan.
Yes.
Okay, that's 29 yes.
Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 11, resolution loan to the Barron County Fair Association for electrical upgrades to the Barron County Fairgrounds. I need a motion to approve that. Motion by Supervisor Gore, second by Supervisor Fredo. As it's indicated in Jeff's update, you know, we're talking, the property I think is already authorized, what was it, the 125,000. So anybody have any concerns or questions relative to that? If not, well, again, we need roll call vote, we need 2/3 to approve that.
Bill Efforts.
Yes.
Bert Skinner.
Yes.
Bill Heimke.
Yes.
Bob Rogers.
Yes.
Oscar Schob.
Yes.
John Banks.
Yes.
Terry Lee.
Yes.
Carolyn Bartlett.
Yes.
Pam Paul.
Yes.
Bill Schredel.
Yes.
Gary Taxcom.
Yes.
Jim Gores.
Yes.
Gary Nelson.
Yes.
Roberta Mosenty.
Yes.
Pete Olson.
Yes.
Steve Johnson.
Yes.
Carol Moen.
Yes.
Eric Panier.
Yep, thumbs up.
Louis Oki.
Yes.
Russ Renzick.
Yes.
Todd Gerlin.
Yes.
Jerry McRoberts.
Yes.
Mark Thompson.
Yes.
Von Hansen.
Yes.
Stacy Wenzel.
Thumbs up.
Dana.
Yes.
Bob Anderson.
Yes.
Sam Buchanan.
Yes.
Don Horstman.
Yes.
Now 29 voting yes.
Again, it's passed unanimously. Thank you. Item number 12, resolution of Dusty Trail Finders loan. Can I get a motion to approve that? Motion by Supervisor Skinner, seconded by Supervisor Heineke. As indicated again in Jeff's update, they have a $12,000 principal now. They'll be adding 45 and 57. And I asked Jody how they were performing. They haven't missed any. They're also even contemplating prepaying some. Anybody have any concerns or questions about that? If not, we'll take a roll call on this one.
Bert Skinner.
Yes.
Dale Heineke.
Yes.
Bob Rogers.
Yes.
Oscar Schob.
Yes.
John Banks.
Yes.
Terry Lee.
Yes.
Carolyn Bartlett.
Yes.
Pam Paul,
Yes.
Bill Stradle,
Yes.
Gary Textall,
Yes.
Jim Gores,
Yes.
Gary Nelson,
Yes.
Roberta Mosentee,
Yes.
Pete Olson,
Yes.
Steve Johnson,
Yes.
Carol Moen,
Yes.
Eric Pender,
Thumbs
Leo
up.
Peak,
Yes, yes.
Russ Renzig,
Yes.
Todd Gerlin,
Yes.
Jerry McRoberts,
Yes.
Rob Thompson,
Yes.
Bud Hanson,
Yes.
Stacy Wenzel,
Yes.
Thumbs up.
Yep, thumbs up.
Dan Heller,
Yes.
Bob Anderson,
Yes.
Tim Buchanan,
Yes.
Don Horstman,
Yes.
Bill Effort.
Yes.
Okay, all 29 voting yes.
Good, it's unanimous, thank you. The resolution is passed. Item number 13, an ordinance to amend the Parks and Recreation ordinance relating to regulations of county rifle ranges. There was an ordinance in there, and Don's had a motion to pass that ordinance, seconded by Supervisor Anderson. Okay, we had a good discussion on that. Is there any issues with that one? If not, all is in favor of passing the ordinance to amend the Parks and Recreation ordinance relating to regulations affecting county rifle ranges, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Again, passed unanimously, thank you. Item number 14, resolution supporting Mosaic Technologies application for American Rescue Plan Act funds and Public Service Commission grant. Get a motion to approve that. Motion by Supervisor Hanson, second by Supervisor Gerlin. Again, we have the resolution in there. Is there any concerns or issues with that? If not, all in favor of passing that resolution, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. It looks like that was unanimous. Item number 15, yeah.
I would really appreciate just, we're just gonna hit some high level things. Jody, if you could present that colored draft that was in the packet. So what we have here, Rachel Rich, our HR director, has put in your packet, and we'll look at it. We're just gonna look at this briefly. This represents, these two shaded areas represent the number of employees that we have that have worked for Barron County or their years in position at Barron County. This represents 10 years. This represents 15 or more. And you can see, this is the number of people. If you could go up so you could see the top part of it, Jody. Thank you. This is our step plan across the top for people. If they are not on a performance improvement plan, they will get a step. So when you look at this, what we're having here is you look at this group right here, we have 27 people working at Barron County that have been here 10 years or more, and they're only at or below market. On our pay plan, step 5, when this was implemented in 2018, step 5 was considered market. So as you look at this and you see these other people represent numbers who have been here that are not, their years of service do not represent, do not correlate to being at the same rate on the step plan. So what's happening is we're getting compression for people that have been here long-term versus the new hires. Because the wage scale overall is being pushed up by the market. So I'm not asking for any, I'm not asking for any action tonight. What the executive committee asked is that Victoria McGrath, who in 2017 and 18 did our wage study so that we would not have a wage claim, because when the unions went away, we did a wage study so that we looked at a comparable analysis of our job descriptions for our employees versus our 20 county comparables, so that we wouldn't get a wage claim. Somebody had said, well, no, we don't have the union, I have a wage claim. So that was the basis for this that got us started. And now with really the market and a tight labor market,
this is, you're getting, what you're seeing is compression of people not keeping up with their steps. So no action tonight. We've asked Victoria to come a month from, or on August 16th, and sit down and explain to the board what we're looking at. Or what,
Be an executive.
right, an executive too, but are what we are looking at here as staff, is she seeing things like this across the nation? Or what's the solution, or what, maybe there isn't a problem, maybe we're just seeing it locally and it's just local. So I don't have any information for you other than something that we're working on, because
We're talking in the neighborhood of $200,000.
right, if you're gonna correct this problem, so it's a lot of money. Again, not asking for any action, we're just gonna go slow and collect as much information. I really appreciate what one of the members of the executive committee said. What we really need right now is to have Victoria educate us on what's really going on, because that's all she does. And she did a really good job on this, so I think it'd be well worth listening to her. So that's the first thing I have on for an update from the county administrator. Yeah, Don?
Kind of what, we also talked about is this plan would work fine if you were starting only with new hires and everything.
Correct.
That's not possible, and that's why it's kind of I'm sure that she's gonna come back with, yes, other people have had the same problem.
Right, but I'd like her to explain that. She's the, when you do something, this is all you do, you get real good at it. And we had Carlson Detman do the study over a decade ago, or maybe it's 12 years ago. Looking at, it was about 12 years ago, I think, John, when I first became county administrator, that we looked at this. And I would just say, I believe Victoria's quality output was very good, and somebody who really did a good job in that. So that's all I have on that.
Yeah, is there a number of where these people should have been at versus where they were at that you can give us? Because it might cover the 200,000 pretty damn easy.
That's correct. And when we implemented the pay plan that we're currently using, what it was is, when we looked at their job descriptions, we placed them in the step that was closest to where they were rated by their job description. It had nothing to do with years of service. And so that's now caught up with us, is how I would explain that.
If you get a market, Gary, that it's more than 200,000.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I'd like to see that number.
Well, I'm sure we'll have it.
Heard.
Are we losing some personnel because of this? I mean, everybody's vying for.
Yes, I would answer that in this way. One thing that the COVID pandemic has done, it's opened up for people to live virtually anywhere and do their job. And so what you have, for example, in her position, you have counties that will say, well, we need a finance director, but we're so desperate to get somebody, we'll only require them to be on site 1 day a week. They can work from home 4 days. Well, now, does it matter if she lives in Dallas, Wisconsin and works for Columbia County or Dane County? No, that's the number one issue in my opinion, but I want you to, that's what I'm seeing. But is that what Victoria is also seeing? That's questions like, as I thought of questions for you to ask her, think about some questions like, Victoria, tell us what you're seeing. Explain to us how telework has affected salaries overall. What does compression do or not do for new hires versus people who've been in that role? What about people who come and then get extra education while they're here? We don't pay for that.
What does it cost to retrain these people that take off from us?
Well, Andy Phillips always says the average cost to hire somebody at the county is about $100,000 once they go. By the time you advertise, recruit, train, get them certified, it's not cheap. So that's the other side of this. So again, appreciate the questions, and in the next month, think of questions that you'd like to ask her, because the last time she was here, I know you, Jim, asked her a series of really good questions, and I think that really helped people understand what this plan was originally implemented for. So think of those questions between now and August 16th. So so we're just going on, report from me, we're
Jeff, you put out a position paper, or maybe that was just to me about some of your ideas of, what Carolyn brought up in exec about fringe benefits being changed and stuff. Did that just come to me?
That was just something Rachel and I were working on as it relates to ARPA and premium pay, because I don't want to talk about that.
I understand, but it'll
That's-
probably come up. later.
That's gonna come up eventually. Let's eat the pizza one pepperoni at a time. So just, we're closing the government center, north entrance. The property committee voted unanimously to do that. I updated you on what's going on in the ADRC with the in-person services. And then if you can see this, if you can make this just a bit bigger, this came to me actually from Zillow, the house selling people. And I do happen to sign up for their service because I think they provide a lot of good information. And so, according to Zillow, the average price of a home in the 54812 area code has jumped 9.4% in the last 12 months, I think it was 14 months, 12 or 14 months. So I got Jody's historical thing out, and I want to talk about this because the first column that you see right here, this is the levy limits that occur in the state of Wisconsin. So you look at, on average, over these number of years that we've had levy limits, we've raised our levy on average per year 1.35%. This number, you're sitting over here, it's right there. That's a number back when the hard levy limits went into effect. So I started looking at what equalized valuation has done. Well, in the same time frame, equalized valuation has went up almost 4%. 3.94 in my mind is 4%. So then I looked over here, Jody, I can't remember what I put at the top of that column, sorry. I looked just at where we've increased the mill rate, because I said, well, if you're increasing the mill rate faster than equalized valuation, well, that's not a good thing. But we're almost 1% below what equalized valuation is. Remember what equalized valuation is. That's a statistical analysis done by the Department of Revenue of the number of sales within a municipality to determine how people are bidding up the price of an existing residence, okay? So then I looked at sales tax. Sales tax is even greater. So then I got thinking about this, and all I want us to think about is if this trend continues at roughly 2% faster increase in equalized valuation than net new construction, what happens is 20 or 30 years from now, the equalized valuation has way outpaced everything else. So what you would have is you'd have a graph, if you look like this, you'd have like alligator arms here, you'd have a graph of equalized valuation going like this, but the hard levy limit down here. So you're gonna have all this space in between where people who have bought in here are paying a disproportionate share of the equalized valuation because they've paid more, so they've driven the equalized valuation up here. Yeah, good, thank you. So think 2 states where this is happening, Colorado and California. Okay, no reason, I want us to noodle on this because for us in this room, probably not a big deal. But the next generation, they're gonna have a pent up demand for taxation that's not it's not out there. But it's gonna be sitting there, as accountants would call that, an unrecognized liability sitting out there that's eventually going to have to come into the revenue stream at some point.
One of the things there, what do you call them, when I was a realtor, that in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the sales of houses were what's happening now. You sit there and you listed a house and it went for $60,000 more than what, or $20,000 more than what it listed for. 12 years later, they were trying to sell those houses and they were lucky if they could get 60% of what they paid for that house. And they'd sit there, come back, well, I gotta have this because I got this stuck in it. I have this invested in it. It don't matter. And that's what I can just about guarantee you that by 2030, these same houses are going to be selling for less than what they are now.
Yeah, I just thought this was just something to keep in our minds as we think down the road, long term. That's all I got.
Okay, is that it for?
That's it.
All right, on the appointments, in your, information, you said appoint Mr. Gifford until next August, but on the agenda, it says August 7th, 22.
That's just, yeah, till next year, August of 2022. That's fine, August 7th is fine.
Can I get a motion to appoint Dave Gifford as a land information officer until August 7th of 1922? Motion by Supervisor Nelson, seconded by Supervisor Rizzick. Any concerns? Not all those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? Yeah, motion's carried. Claims, petitions, and correspondence. None's left, so it must not be any. 18, suggestions for future agenda items, which is on next August 16th, 21, obviously Victoria McGrath and the housing
Resolutions, and then we'll be talking about redistricting. Yep.
I
I don't know what Mark's at. I don't think so.
I think we'll do that yet.
We can't do that.
Anything else? Not, we'll adjourn by unanimous consent at 8:26.